past, owning people was a norm. Now we recognize this as an injustice and a crime of the highest sorts. But we don't think we express this regret to the descendants of the slaves who still hold a grudge and are burdened with societal disadvantages on a daily basis. It's in the spirit of changing this that we are so proud to propose the resolution. This House will pay reparations to descendants of slaves. So as your first proposition speaker today, I'm going to be doing a few things for you. I'm going to be setting up the debate pretty clearly, and I'm going to be presenting our first 2 points on our side of the House today about, firstly, how this creates equality, and about, secondly, the need for reparations in our society and how this benefits the descendants of the slaves. But before I do that, I want to go into some key definitions that we think are really going to clear up the debate today. So we would define this House as all Western liberal democracies. In our case, we're going to really be focusing on the United States because that's where we think slavery was most prevalent. We would define reparations as like a monetary apology offered by the government, and we think this amount would obviously be set by this party and would be given to direct descendants. In other words, we think that a descendant can't be like married into a family, and it would be given to all people alive during a period of 3 years in which the government would pay these reparations. And we think these people would obviously have to have like some sort of proof of connection to like these slaves, and they would be filing a claim to a government office in order to receive their reparations. So let's take a look at our first point on our side of the House today about how this is going to create the equality that we essentially don't have in our status quo. We're going to be analyzing this under 2 different subpoints. Firstly, about the moral duty, and secondly, about the practical duty that we hold. So firstly, the moral duty. We think that as a government, we've acknowledged that this is the issue of slavery and have actively opposed its usage in the status quo. We would tell you it's firstly our moral obligation to understand the sufferings of these individuals and their ancestors and the sufferings that they've experienced due to the cause of slavery in our society. We think these individuals have already been regarded as historically unequal in our society and in our government, and the duress they faced that was considered acceptable is now considered injustice. And we would tell you that as a government who once condoned these kinds of actions, we have this duty to have like this kind of consistency in our policies, to acknowledge the harm we created in the past. We would tell you that in the status quo, we realize that the words of like, I'm sorry are often not enough, especially when they're like decades after the incidents, because they don't actually give like a tangible benefit to these people, because the descendants of slaves don't actually like feel the words, I'm sorry, because of the sufferings their ancestors have gone through. We recognize that often even monetary funds aren't enough, but we think that at least it's going to give these people a tangible benefit that they can actually use. And until the government repays these people, we don't think we can fully acknowledge our faults as a society and as a government and acknowledge that what we made a mistake in the past putting these people what they went through. We think we need to be like mending these kinds of scars that we have in our history. But secondly, let's take a look at the practical responsibility our government holds and why we essentially have to be paying reparations to these descendants. We think that we have this practical responsibility to uphold because we tell you, if you look at the statistics, we see like Black Americans in the United States have the highest percentage of their group under the poverty line compared to any other race. Nearly 28% of their whole ethnic group is under the poverty line. We think there's like a direct correlation between that and slave times. We would tell you that after slave times, we think you saw Black Americans being constantly disadvantaged and effectively like put in this lower socioeconomic class, and that like hurt them in the long run. We would tell you that works that way because when they were emancipated, the government declared them as like free, no thank you. But we think they weren't actually like equal in regards to other like previous slave owners. We think that when slave owners lost their slaves, they still had like this economic backing. They had like the support system because of all the money they had. We think Black people were essentially like left alone in the streets. We don't think they were given any kind of monetary backing to like be supported off of, and they were like left with no like kind of financial security in their system. We think, and that's like a big contributing factor to the wealth gap that we see in our current society between like Black Americans and any other individual in our society. We think that's what's causing this like rift in our community, and this kind of like the government paying these reparations is actually going to be fixing that in a very influential way. But secondly, let's take a look at the need for reparations. And under this point, we think we're going to look at how the descendants actually use this money and why paying these kinds of reparations is going to be so effective and so impactful for the good well-being of these people. Firstly, how are descendants going to use their money? We think that rather than these people like going off receiving this money and blowing it off on like wasteful stuff, we think they're more likely to use this money to create tangible support for themselves, to aid themselves, to pick themselves up from the economic duress that they face after these kinds of slave times. We're not going to tell you that every individual in the population is going to use this money well. We think we have to acknowledge that on our side of the house to be realistic. We think it's inevitable that there's going to be a very small minority of this population who's going to use these resources ineffectively. But we think that's not something that's going to only happen under our side status quo. We would tell you that the people, I'll take you in a second, who are likely to waste these resources probably already waste welfare resources in the status quo. They waste economic benefits the government gives them. We don't think that changes under our model. Sure.
Are you realize that in the status quo these people don't have an obstacle to really work hard and have money?
Okay, thank you. We don't actually think that's factually true. I proved this to you in my first point, but we think that people have always been put at an economic disadvantage. We think if you look back in time, these people were never given the same rights. We think that still exists. You look at the statistics, which obviously don't lie, and you see this population living in lower socioeconomic standards. We think it's obvious that they're suffering even if they're trying hard, and that's why we need to be paying these reparations. We think, okay, so again, these people are probably already wasting their welfare funds. We don't think, under our model, any of that changes. But we think we're still going to be benefiting these people because we're actually providing them a tangible apology. We think that at least they're going to understand the government recognizes what they did to them in the past. But however, we think the type of people who use these reparation claims are much more populated. We think they're more unlikely to use this money in a wasteful manner because they understand that this money is directly related to their heritage, to their ancestry, and to the sufferings that their ancestors faced. We think these are the type of people who make these reparations claims. We think these are the type of people who are actually going to take time out of their day to go into a government office and file a claim to revenge their kinds of sufferings. We think those are the people who are going to be aware of their ancestors and more likely to be aware of the historical context behind slavery. We think these are the kinds of people who are going to use this money to actually benefit themselves and to further themselves even with the economic disadvantage they've had in the status quo. We think it's these people who are going to use this money because of their moral center and because they understand that their ancestors suffered directly for them, and this money is going to benefit them and is going to be able to mend the cracks in their history. Under this idea, let's also look at why reparations are so effective. We think the policies that we have in our status quo that are aimed to aid this disadvantaged groups often can't cater to each and every individual's needs. We think that not all people are going to use a university's mandatory acceptance quota for African Americans because that doesn't directly relate to them. The reason why we think paying reparations is so effective is because in the case of money, we think money is a very liquid asset. We think anybody can take money and use it in the way that's going to benefit that individual the best. We think that's a very tangible benefit that we're going to see when we pay these kinds of reparations. We think it's already very clear to us how monetary reparations are so effective and impactful upon this disadvantaged group. So what have I told you today? I firstly explained to you why it was the government's responsibility to create equality through their moral duty and their practical duty. And I also explained to you why paying reparations is so effective and so impactful. It's for these reasons we stand so proud to propose. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as side opposition, we regret inequality and slavery too. But we don't express our regret by reminding the slavery to the people who are not feeling as slaves today. So that is why we are opposing this motion today. Today I'm going to talk about, my first argument will be there's no connection between the slaves of the centuries ago and the people who live as ancestors now. And secondly, how this reparation will make things worse. And my second speaker will talk about how reparation is unjustified. But before moving on to my rebuttals and arguments, we have some questions to ask the side proposition about their model. Firstly, how much money you're actually planning to pay these people so suddenly all of their disadvantage will be gone? And And secondly, from whom you are taking this money from? As you stated, you're taking this money from government, but who are these people that you're taking the taxes and the money from? And we need answers to those questions. And moving on to my rebuttals. The first argument of the side proposition was how we have this moral duty to the ancestors of the slaves. And they told us that how these people were historically unequal and how the slaves suffered in the past. But we have two answers to that. Firstly, we don't think these people suffer because of slavery today. When these people go to work, when these people go to the streets and no one reminds them that your grandfather was a slave, and no one actually discriminates them because of these reasons, ladies and gentlemen. But if we give these monies to people, as I'm going to explain in my argument, we're actually going to remind them the slavery history they had, and we're actually going to make them feel less honorable. And secondly, they have told us the harms that we created in the past. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that, yes, we had harms to slaves in the past, but we had paid paid the harms and by providing equality in front of the law, right? These people are equal in the Constitution right now. They're not owned by other people, and we don't think that the money is the way of destroying these harms. And secondly, they have told us these people are not equal. That's why we need to advance pay them. Wait a second. So you're telling us that these people are not equal, so we need to pay them more, and we're actually making this be unequal, right? Because we're telling the society that these people are not capable of earning the same money you earn. These people are not capable of doing the same job and earning money. So as government, I'm paying them, right? And that is why we think that we're not actually bringing equality in their case, we're actually making these people more unequal in the study scope. And secondly, they have told us that the money we pay to those people will suddenly make their lives so easier, and they will use the money to recover the damages that were in the past. But we have told you that how much money are they going to pay, and when these people will use this money, and what will happen next, ladies and gentlemen. So we gave this money to them, yes, they use it, and well, what happens? They're not in their system, they're not equal because people are not seeing them, but we don't really actually believe in that, and we think that they're actually bringing more discrimination and actually not getting any benefit to those people in the long term. I'm moving on to my argument, which is how there is no connection between these slaves and their ancestors. Today we think that a slave from a century ago doesn't pass the impact of slavery in the society to its grandson, right, ladies and gentlemen? These people are not seen as slaves or discriminated in the society right now. No one reminds their grandfather as slave, and the impact is not carried, ladies and gentlemen. They go to their workplace, they go to their school, and no one actually reminds them of their father or of their grandfather being a slave. And in today's status quo, there is no harm to those people due to their grandfathers being slave once, and that is why there is no point in paying to those ancestors. Because these people are accepted in the society, these people are not seen as slaves and not used in that way. And secondly, we don't think that crimes and being a victim can be something passed by generations, ladies and gentlemen. So if we're not putting the son of a criminal because the father run away and get away with the law, we don't take the son and put it to the jail, ladies and gentlemen. We don't, these are the things that can't be passed directly to the son and directly to the relative. And being victim is the same. That person might have struggled in their lives, but if this is not affecting that person's life, we're not, it's not justified to take the money, to pay these people. Before moving, I can take your question, right?
When someone's whole family was held back economically because like their great-great-grandfather wasn't paid for their work, how is there not a direct correlation between these two?
We think that a century ago, a person might be like economically in a worse situation than other people. But we have gave the same equal rights in front of the Constitution. And there's no obstacle for these people to work and earn money in today's statistical. There's no obstacle that are taking away these rights of the people. And this brings me to my second point, which is now the reparation make things worse by reminding both the society and the relative itself. Why? Because since I told you that laws are equal and people are accepted as equal in today's society, if we pay this reparation to those people, we will remind the past to them, right? We will make them feel inferior again because they're getting paid under the name of slavery and as if it is something like biologically transmitted, ladies and gentlemen. So these people will feel worse and we will throw away all of the progress we have achieved so far. And secondly, we will also remind the past to society itself, right? We will also make this discrimination, we will also remind the discrimination to society itself. Today, like when a small child doesn't call these people as slaves, right? Like they learn these slavery history at school, but no one points out these people and says, like the father of these people was a slave. So we think that by reminding this to the society, we're actually harming the peaceful and equal environment and hurt the honorable lives of the people we pay reparation to. And secondly, the reparation is not the solution even if the person goes through a struggle. Let's talk about the reason that slaves fought for. They fought for freedom, right? They fought for honor. They fought for equality. So the people wanted a life with their free wills. When government gave these rights to those people by banning slavery, their desires were fulfilled, right? That is why people are not actually protesting on streets today and begging for their rights because they are not feeling the impacts of slavery today. So that is why the only way of providing these is the rights of equality and being socially accepted. That is why money will do no good to those people who feel the pain of the past. And actually, as we told you, these are the people who are not feeling the pains of the past that much anyways. So that is why we believe that we shouldn't be paying the reparations and it will make things even worse. Thank you.
Imagine a world where it was okay to own someone, where it was okay to take advantage of a human being as a form of property for income. A world where the government justified this for far too long. But, Mr. and Madam Speaker, this world was once a legitimate reality that the government stood for. And that is why we know that it is our House's responsibility to act on these previous injustices in a tangible way that is going to demonstrate efforts for progress and equality. And that is why we are so proud to be proposing this resolution before us today. So as your second speaker on side proposition, I will be going into some extensive refutation of what you heard from the first proposition speaker, and then I'm going to be rebuilding the points that my partner Min has already delivered to you that we feel were not properly addressed. Then I'll be going into our last constructive point on the benefits to society that will come with this resolution. So let's go into some of this rebuttal. Firstly, let's look at rebuttal under the theme of equality. So we've heard side opposition come to us and tell us that there is no connection between the slaves of now and the slaves of before. They've basically asserted to us this idea that people under the status quo, who are the descendants of slaves, are not being discriminated in society. We've told you already that this is not true. Why is this not true? Because we think that oftentimes slaves are associated with their skin color. And with the prevalence of racism in American society, we think that this discrimination is actually passed on. We haven't seen it be eradicated. Furthermore, my partner Min brought up to you in a POI that this economic status can be passed down, because these slaves don't have the same foundation of money to be put on that, for example, slave owners who own a lot of property currently do. Now, we feel that they didn't really adequately respond to this POI because they gave us two responses. First of all, they said, oh, well, they're equal in the Constitution, so they're equal now. But we tell you in response to this that, initially, these slaves were not even equal in the Constitution, and that secondly, they've asserted to us that they're accepted as equal in society, but we actually think this is not true, for the reasons that I've already told you and for reasons I'll be going into. But secondly, under this idea of equality, they've told us that these people are not begging for their rights. We tell you that they literally are. With the prevalence of oppression that's happening, with these police protests that have been going on, we think that the descendants of these slaves have been begging for their rights. But then they've told us that this progress is going to be taken away, and that slaves, these descendants of slaves, don't actually want this. We tell you, first of all, what progress. There is a lack of progress going on right now because these people are being put in an unequal state in society. Secondly, we think that we're not actually reminding them of this discrimination. What is reminding them of discrimination is the fact that they're at a lower socioeconomic status, the fact that they live in a society that has chosen to oppress them on account of their skin color, the same society that chose to oppress them 100 years ago as slaves on the same exact account. We think that we're not taking progress away, we're actually implementing progress in a sustainable form that is going to last for these people. We're going to be giving them progress to equate themselves in society, something that Min has already talked to you about. But secondly, they've told us that these people are not actually looked at as slaves anymore. They've told us that they're not being pointed out as slaves, but when we give them this money, they will be. First of all, we've already told you that they are, in a sense, because racism is correlated to this idea of slavery. And for as long as that mindset of racism exists, we think that it doesn't matter from which way this is going to be going from. On our side of the house, we have not given you the burden that we're going to take away racism. We've taken on this burden that we're going to eradicate discrimination on account of socioeconomic reasons, something that they have yet to address. But then let's look at these two burdens that they've tried to push on our side of the house today. First of all, they've asked us to tell you how much money we're going to be giving these slaves. Well, as we told you in our model, we think this is up to the discretion of the House. We think that on our side of the House today, we need to prove that providing these reparations is legitimate. We don't necessarily need to prove the exact number. But secondly, they've asked us where this money is coming from. And in response to this, we tell you that we think these countries, they have access to taxpayers. There are overhead funds that could be used for these purposes. So now let's move into some rebuilding. So first of all, Min talked to you about this idea of the moral obligation that we have to these slaves, how they've suffered in the past, and therefore it is our government's responsibility to take account for these actions, to take account for legitimizing the act of slavery. Now in response to this, they've told us oh no, these people don't actually suffer from slavery, they don't suffer from discrimination, they're not identified as slaves, therefore this point does not stand. Once again, we tell you that this moral obligation still exists because there is racism, there is discrimination, and you can discern who a slave is on account of their skin color, at least a descendant of a slave. We think this idea still stands. But secondly, Min talked to you about the practical implications of this, how these people are unequal and therefore we need to be paying them more in order to equate them in society. They've told us that by doing so, we're telling society they are incapable of earning money. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not talking about the capabilities of these people. We think they're perfectly capable to be doing so, but unfortunately, our society has placed them at a disadvantage, and we think that in order to achieve equality, first of all, you need to be getting equity. Secondly, Min talked to you about the need for reparations because, first of all, we think they're going to be using this money for good reasons in concern to this historical context. We feel they didn't really address this. Secondly, Min talked to you about how waste is not going to be changing on our side of the house, how it's actually going to be used for more practical reasons. We feel that they have also not really responded to this, so we'd love to hear something from them. All right, so now let's go into my point on the benefits that are coming to society. So I'll be examining this on two levels. First of all, economic status, and secondly, internal and external objects. So we think that, first of all, this idea of economic status. We're using this money as a form of kickstarting these people who have been put at the socioeconomic disadvantage simply because of the background they were born into, the race that they were born into. We think this is something our society has failed to get rid of. We think that slave owners, for example, and their descendants were never put at this type of disadvantage. And we think that this disadvantage, this economic and social disadvantage, has led to a reliance on the government. We think that this is justifiable, but that it is actually unsustainable, because we can't keep paying like small amounts in forms of like welfare and programs for like a long time. We think that what we need to be doing is putting in this like sustainable long-term form of like tangible equality. We think that by paying them with these reparations, we're going to be giving them independence from the government in the long term. We think this is going to benefit the families of these slaves because now they have the ability to sustain and to grow into something that they may not have had before because of these inherent disadvantages. But secondly, we actually think this is going to benefit the taxpayers because in the long term, what is going to happen is that instead of being disadvantaged and being viewed as a sort of burden, this economic equality means they can maximize their value as contributors to the economy. But now let's look at this idea of optics. First of all, internally. We think that unlike the status quo, where these descendants feel no tangible benefits from the government, only the tangible harm of once having their families being put into a disadvantage, we think that when the government recognizes these actions and takes legitimate steps towards reconciliation, these people are going to feel more incentivized to respect the government and the country as a whole. We think this is going to lead to a more cohesive and inclusive country where people once again feel more inclined to contribute and to work hard as a result of the reciprocal respect they're going to be feeling. But secondly, let's look at the external optics, how society is going to view the government. We think that currently American society in particular is being looked down upon for the way they treated slaves and for the way that they treat African Americans with oppression. But we think that when we acknowledge this racism and this historical context, we're going to be making the government look more capable, look more respectful, and we're going to be making the fight against racism look legitimate, stronger, cohesive, and supported by society. And so it is for these reasons that we are so proud to propose the resolution today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to present one argument which is reparation is unjustified, but before moving on to my argument, I'm going to rebut side propositions arguments. First of all, their first argument was that this is going to create an equality, firstly because our moral duty, because these people who are descendants of the slaves today are still suffering and they face inequality. First, we have two responses to that, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, side proposition exaggerates the status quo. People today don't suffer as much as they think. They don't suddenly start thinking that, yes, my ancestors were slaves, I'm very sorry, I was always left out. And we don't think that this works that way. It's been a long time that slavery has been removed, and people don't really think of it as much as they did in the past. And secondly, even if they really suffered from this slavery, reparations won't solve the problem, because money doesn't change the past, right? Money doesn't change that their ancestors really suffered in the past, but also it reminds people that their ancestors were really slaves, and they're coming from a bloodline that were slaves in the past. So this doesn't actually change anything, but it makes actually people suffer more. And the second point of them was the practical duty, and they talked about how black people are today under the poverty line and how they face economic disadvantage. We have two responses to that too. First of all, we today believe that African American people are under the poverty line not because of the slavery in the past, but because they were pushed to their ghettos and they were reminded that they can succeed today because they were not a part of the society, and they also made themselves believe in that. Even though today in Constitution there is equality, even though in laws protect equality, these people may believe in themselves that they are not equal with others and they can't be able to succeed. So we believe, ladies and gentlemen, to solve the problem, we should make them the part of the society, but giving reparations doesn't solve it
at all. That even makes it worse because of two reasons. Firstly, because these black people would think that it's impossible for to succeed by themselves. Even government agrees upon that and gives them money so that they won't, since they are not able to succeed, since they are not able to have money on their own. Secondly, this will remind them that they are coming from the bloodline of the slavery and they can't be part of the society. They were always a separate group of people and they will continue to be the separate people. Moving on to second part, second response. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that if they're talking about US today, as we said today, we see equal standards, we see equal laws, we see equal constitution. Even there is a black president, right? And even if there was a still disadvantage for these descendants, even if there was really discrimination, why we are asking you, ladies and gentlemen, why not removing disadvantages? Today's side proposition tells these people to actually run a marathon where there's obstacles, but to help these people, they actually give them better shoes. But they're asking you, why not removing obstacles? Why not trying to only solve discrimination? Why not only giving money, which is not a long-term solution? And ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the nature of the reparations. We believe that reparation is only given when the problem is completely solved. And it says that, yes, we had a problem, we solved this problem, and we are sorry that we did these mistakes, and we are actually paying reparations. We saw that in the past. So Germany paid reparations to Jew people because there was genocide, but they paid these reparations after no more Jews were being killed, after the problem was completely removed. However, as side proposition says, this problem is still present, and there's still discrimination, and there's still some unbeneficial things to these people. Firstly, we think that we shouldn't pay reparations and we should only solve the problem. Secondly, we think it will create the perception that the problem is solved today, and government won't really try to do anything to solve about discrimination anymore. They won't make policies to remove discrimination, and they will say that, yes, we paid reparations, we don't need to do anything anymore. Before moving on to my argument, I can take.
Why does it matter that people have equal rights in the Constitution when the government doesn't provide them with economic equality to the descendants, when the black people are statistically shown to be under the poverty line because the government doesn't award them this kind of equality?
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't think that today black people are under the poverty line because government makes policies or government thinks that way. We still see that black people can work hard, can get into jobs, can become CEOs, or even become the American president, and we don't think that government actually puts obstacles on that. Only society puts them, and this reparation won't even solve this problem. Now, moving on to my argument why reparation is unjustified. Today I'm going to prove you how only government is responsible from slavery, and secondly, why this is not justified to take people's money. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the money that government pays as reparation will come from people, right? And today, side proposition told us that slave masters were actually still rich when they lost their slaves, so this is justified to take their money. But ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we believe it's impossible to identify only slave masters in the past and only take their money to pay as reparations, and this is not even their model, because there were no regulations and no records in the past. So reparation will come from government's treasury, which is actually the money of the people, which is the tax of the people. But we believe in this case, government was responsible of the slavery because it couldn't protect people from slavery. It couldn't provide equality in this case. So if there's going to be a reparation, government can give something which only belongs to itself, since it's the only responsible body. But government treasury doesn't belong to government itself. Why? Because people pay taxes in order to receive service, and government doesn't owe the money at all. It's only preserves it to use it for benefits of the community, right? So the government can't use the money of people to repay its own mistake because it doesn't repay at all, as we have talked about in our first speaker too. So government's reparation should come from the law. It's only responsible by this, so it should give back people their freedom and equality, and it should secure people's equality by law. And in this case, that's what government should do, and what it's trying to do to repay its mistakes. Now, let's analyze more why is it illegitimate to use people's money? Because, ladies and gentlemen, today we collect tax from every single person in the society, so reparations are also paid by people, and it's not justified. First, because not every individual's ancestors were slave masters, right? They didn't own slaves, maybe. If as side proposition says, the idea of slavery can pass further generations, not being involved in slavery, being innocent, is also passed further by generations. So we think it's not justified to take money of people who are innocent, whose ancestors were also innocent, and they don't have the responsibility. So it's not legitimate to use their money for government to actually make their mistake solved. And even if it was possible to identify slave masters in the past, we believe it's still not justified to take their descendants' money. Why? Firstly, because we believe it was not slave masters' responsibility and fault too. Because government in the past led them to do so. Government didn't say you can't own people. Government didn't actually prevent them from doing so. And there was a social norm. So these people actually followed the social norm. These people actually said what government says to them. So it makes government responsible and not the slave masters. And secondly, if even slave masters were guilty in this case, we still believe we can't actually make their descendants pay for it. Because it doesn't make the descendants guilty. We believe crime is not passed for their generation. We don't imprison murderers, sons or daughters, right, if he is dead. We believe this is the same case. Crime is only about the individual, not about the bloodline, and we can't actually pay their bloodline about the crime that they have committed before in the past. So, ladies and gentlemen, since we have proven you that these reparations will bring no benefit but harm, and we have proven you that it's not justified to use people's money for actually repair government's mistake, we believe we have won this debate. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, an opposition that doesn't understand nor the past nor the present, a side that justifies the act of slavery with words and apologies. This is the opposition we've seen in today's debate. And it's on that basis we're so proud to still be proposing the resolution we set out at the start of today's debate. What am I doing as the third proposition speaker today? I'm going to summarize today's debate under two main themes. Firstly, does this resolution actually change societies and government stance on slavery, racism, and equality? And secondly, is reparation a practical benefit and necessity for these descendants? Using these themes, I'm going to prove the burdens we set out at the start of today's debate and secure the win for proposition. Let's get right into this first theme. Does this resolution actually change societies and government stance on slavery, racism, and equality? What did opposition tell you under this theme? It told you two ideas. Let's start with the first one, being like unrelated with the slaves of the past and descendants of the present. Two responses, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, we tell you that giving these people, like giving the descendants, something they rightfully deserve, like their rights, is not enough, right? We think that in the past and in the present, rights is something that people just fundamentally already deserve. You can't like justify the act of slavery, justify the abuse of people by giving them these rights that they already should have had in the past, right? This is something very important on our side of the house, that we do like actually give a tangible benefit in addition to these rights, right? What are slaves, right? There are people that have been abused and oppressed, right? They give on to their next generation nothing. Whereas, for example, my father, if he was to pass away, he would give me things such as inheritance, what he gave me like through what he earned throughout his life. These slaves give their next generation nothing, even though they work like money-making machines, right? We think that in this situation, it's the job of the next government to actually provide these people with what they have deserved. Mr. Speaker, we think that these people, these descendants, are actually fully aware of how they got in this situation, right? We think that they might even resent the people of society and the people of the government for this action. We think that on our side of the house, the government has to take an extra step, actually take a clear stance that we have to protect this, like these groups of people, and we have to actually promote equality. That's what the government does on our side of the house. What happens on their side of the house? We have an irresponsible and weak government that sits back, doesn't do anything, and thinks that rights justify everything that's happened in the past. This is something that's very important. What's their second idea under this theme? They told you just recently on their second opposition speaker about this being like being only the government's responsibility. It's completely not the responsibility of the people because they're all innocent. All right, Mr. Speaker, two ideas. Firstly, we tell you that it is the government's responsibility to act in the interest of the people, right? That's the duty of the government. We tell you that this is a huge issue, taking priority out of all the different issues in society, right? That's why we're prioritizing this, because remember, these are a group of people that have been oppressed by America, and it's a duty of America as a whole, everyone that lives in America, to be held accountable for these situations, right? If they are citizens of America, they have to deal with the past. They have to realize that there are consequences with dealing with America's past if they are to be a citizen of America, and it is the government's responsibility to act in the best interest. If we have a people that have been so oppressed and abused, we think that it is the correct moral and a practical benefit when we do give these benefits to these people. Now that I've taken them all their arguments under this theme, let's move into what we've told you under this theme. What did we tell you? We told you about this new idea. We told you about this idea about mending historical scars, basically this idea about equality. What did opposition tell you in response? We told you that, well, these descendants don't really suffer because it was a thing of so long ago, and reparations won't really work, and ultimately they're still paid by equality. Two responses. Mr. Speaker, we tell you that they have suffered, right? And opposition never really gave you an analysis into why they haven't suffered. We tell you that these are people who have started from scratch, literally nothing. When they pass on, these slaves aren't given money for their work. No, they started from nothing. So when they do even manage to live, their children, they start from scratch. So even if right now in society they aren't super duper in the under the poverty line, we tell you that it's not about what is right now. It's about how they started out. And the fact is that they did start out in a disadvantaged situation. They did start out in such a horrible situation. And if this is the case, then it's a responsibility of the government to own up to this situation, right? We can't say that even if these people are okay in society right now, we can't just justify oh, you're sitting pretty well right now, so we should just forget about the entire past, right? No, this doesn't work. We need a responsible government that actually owns up to their past, owns up to the situation, owns up to what actually happened. But what else did we tell you? We told you about the benefits of to society. Opposition never gave us any responses to this idea. We think that this still very much stands. Now let's move into the second theme about is reparation a practical benefit and necessity for these descendants? What did opposition tell you? They told you that we're only going to make things worse, right? Why? Because the government has fulfilled their duty as soon as they're banning slavery, and they don't have to do anything else like this. Also, society won't really like it. Mr. Speaker, we have to look at the situation, right? In status quo, like my partner Min said, the black population was statistically proven to be much lower in the poverty line than the other groups. And this is not only to, not to mention specifically descendants of slaves, right? We tell you that they do deserve things like this. We think families of non-slaves will actually support this movement because of the growing idea about the movement of equality, right? In the end, it's not only the government, the fault of the government, but also the fault of the people, right? We think that with or without these people's consent, this is still a payment that needs to be made either way, right? But what else do we tell you? We think that a government that thinks slavery is justified after just an apology is simply a weak and irresponsible one. On side opposition and proposition, we do believe that we need to achieve equality, and on proposition, we're actually doing something in order to achieve equality. We're having a government take a stance saying we have to protect these people. This is something we have to do. I'll take you in a second. This is how we show the entire society we're actually taking a stance, we're actually doing something. Whereas opposition, we see a government that's sitting back and doing nothing. I'll take you right.
If there's still discrimination and these obstacles, don't you think it's still going to be hard for them to use this as have an economic?
All right, thank you very much. And we think that that's the problem, right? If there is discrimination, or should we tell you that there's a movement right now that there's a huge movement in society actively opposing it? What they're doing on their side of the house is this discrimination is only going to get worse when we see a government that hasn't really taken a strong stance on the situation, sits back and says, well, let's let the people figure everything out. No, Mr. Speaker, we need a government that actively takes a stance to say, no, these people must be protected. We need a stance of a government that is very strong, takes an actual action in order to stop these problems. That's what we need here today, Mr. Speaker. Now, what did we tell you under this theme about reparation? We told you about the importance of reparation. All opposition told you in response is, well, how much money are you going to give? Well, there's still no long-term benefits even if you do give them this money. Sir, a monetary payment will always have an impact, right? Regardless of what opposition tells you, monetary impact, a monetary payment always does have an impact. Otherwise, we need side opposition to actually tell you why this monetary payment won't be an impact. That's what opposition has to do for you today. They can't just tell you, oh, it's not going to have a long-term effect, because we tell you that people in the poverty line, when they are paid with a monetary payment, they are getting a benefit on our side of the house, rather than what we see on opposition side. We see a government that says, oh, these descendants are saying, wow, the government hasn't really given me anything, I'm still going to resent them, and we haven't seen a government that's taken a stance. So what have we told you? Well, using these things, I've told you, firstly, why society is actually going to benefit from this. Secondly, why reparation actually has an impact. It's because of these reasons we're still so proudly standing here today to propose the resolution. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's side proposition's burden was to prove that it was justified and necessary to actually pass this motion, and they should have proven us that there was a problem and this motion would solve the problem, but they failed in doing so, as I'm about to explain. Well, we believe that there were two main crash points in this debate. Firstly, the justification of actually paying this reparation, and secondly, the harms and benefits it's going to bring to the society as a whole. So I'll start with justification. Well, their first point was about how the state has a moral duty and how it should understand the suffering of, firstly, individuals. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these individuals, we have already explained, you don't usually suffer because their ancestors were slaves. People walking randomly on the street don't just approach them and tell them that your ancestor was a slave. You should be very, very, very upset. This has been left in the past, and people have been overcoming these with the passing laws and with the normalization process, that even side proposition has just admitted that discrimination was already getting more. And then they have told us that if we don't pass the motion, it's suddenly going to get more powerful. But we don't understand, ladies and gentlemen, because currently we're not paying this reparation and discrimination is getting less powerful. And now when we suddenly pay this money, it's going to be even less powerful. They should have explained this. And secondly, we have told you that being a criminal or being a victim doesn't pass on to further generations. And thus, we do not, for example, punish a criminal's son or daughters because of a crime he has committed. And we have shown you that just because someone's grandfather was a victim, this doesn't make that particular person a victim, and thus there's no reason to pay these reparations. No answer from side proposition. And they have told us about how it's going to make the state look like it recognizes the suffering of the ancestors. Well, again, we have two responses. Firstly, we have shown you that the state has already recognized these ancestors' sufferings by actually passing this law against all those sufferings, passing this law that prevented all these sufferings and ended all these sufferings. And they have told us that they already should have had this right. This right should have already been given to them, so this isn't an extra thing that state has done. But ladies and gentlemen, then we believe that the true way of actually repairing and recognizing those ancestors and those individuals' problems, those individuals' sufferings, would be overcoming the obstacles, overcoming the racism, overcoming the discrimination that they have been telling us about. But by paying money, we're not doing any of this. By paying money, we're not actually solving the root problem that's causing all these suffering. And we have shown you that today, if under the law, if on the eyes of the law, a black person and a white person is equal, then this should actually lead the society into believing that a white person and a black person is equal. And that's how these people's sufferings are actually overcome, are actually repaid. And we have also shown you that while they were trying to actually diminish the socioeconomic side of this racism doesn't really come from the socioeconomic difference. We have shown you that racism is in people's mindsets. These people do not discriminate people because they are in a lower socioeconomic background. They discriminate people simply because of the fact that they're black, no matter if they're a CEO or a poor person. And if we really want to overcome this problem, giving them money is not enough. We need to change their mindsets, and that's how we repay. Moreover, we have shown you how they misunderstood the whole concept of reparation. We have shown you that reparation is given when there was a problem, and now it's solved, and it's the state's way of saying we are sorry. But they have told us that there's still a problem, and we're telling them that if there is still a problem, then they should tackle with the problem first before giving reparations money. First, they should make sure that there isn't this discrimination, there isn't this racism. First, they should attack on the people's mindsets. Because if this discrimination still exists, we are showing you that this money is not going to make any difference at all. Our second speaker has already explained that these people would not be able to use this money for the benefit of themselves if this discrimination still exists in the long term. In the long term, there's not going to be the change of these people's mindsets if we simply just give them money. And we have also explained to you, under the second dash, harms and benefits of the society, how paying the descendants also creates the perception that the state has done what it should have already done. Problem solved, okay, everything is okay. But we have shown you that there is still this ongoing problem, there's still this discrimination, the side proposition has already agreed upon, and that just paying money is going to create the perception that we don't need to do anything else, that state has already paid what it should have paid. And we need to overcome the obstacles. If we really want to provide equality, just by giving money, we can't do this. And we're talking about an amount of money they haven't specified. We cannot, we as side opposition do not understand, by just simply giving them money, it's even going to get them out of the socioeconomic background at all, ladies and gentlemen. We need a long-term solution. And under this clash, they had this point about practical duty and how black people were more under the poverty line. Well, we had two responses. Firstly, there has been improvements since this law passed, right? That these people have been given the chance to work for their money and to get this money and to better their life standards. And we see a lot of successful African-American black people who use this advantage for themselves, who became CEOs, who became successful in life, and even the president. And if there is a group of people that were not able to use these advantages, it's because of the society, it's because of the mindset the society pushed upon them, it's because of the limitations that the society and even their own mindsets put upon them. Why? Because of the fact that they were made to believe that they were inferior, because of the fact that they were made to believe that they could never be successful, and that's what we should overcome if we really want to provide equality. And we have this whole argument about how this is going to remind them of the past, how now slavery remains in history, but when we bring it to the front, suddenly, how it's going to make the pain even deeper, and how it's going to affect the mindsets of the people even worse. We told you this under 2 points. Firstly, we have shown you how we're reminding the individuals that their ancestors were slaves, and how it makes them feel as if this slavery was carried on with generations, and how they have this direct effect of slavery, whereas we have already explained that neither being a victim nor a criminal passes on to generations, and these people shouldn't be held responsible. They shouldn't be held as if they were inferior because of the situation of their ancestors. And secondly, we have shown you how it's going to affect the mindset of the society. We have shown you today a little child doesn't go to a black person and say that your ancestors were slaves, then you are inferior too. But when we pass this motion, it's going to create the perception that these African-American people, even though this law has passed, are still weak, which is not true. We see that under the eyes of the law, they're equal. But this is going to create the perception that they're still inferior, that they still have this problem. And their second point was about how the government is going to become more responsible and how the people are going to be more bound to the government. Well, our second speaker has already explained to you that the government, by passing this resolution, is going to look as if it was underestimating all the effort that the African American put into this movement. These people worked for their freedoms. They spent so much effort in order to get these rights. And they're getting these rights now. They are equal under the eyes of the law. And the society is going better, as that proposition has agreed to. In society, discrimination is getting lower and lower as time passes with the normalization process. But by paying them this money, the government acts as if all the response of all these efforts could be simply measured by money, as if the true response to that movement, the true response of all this effort was not the right, was not the society's perception that they were equal, but just some amount of money, which we believe that was very problematic. They have accused us of being the side of words and apologies, but no, ladies and gentlemen. Because today we're the side that advocates solving the root cause of the problem, and because they have not shown us how it's justified to pay us money, they were caught.
Ladies and gentlemen, there were three main clash points of this debate today. Firstly, is it justified to pay these reparations? And secondly, is it bringing harm or benefits to these people? To begin with the first clash, the main case of the side proposition was based on the moral obligation that the government has to own these peoples because the history still affects them, because the history still harms them. And secondly, they have told the economic disadvantage that these people are struggling with. We have some responses to that. Firstly, we told you that slavery doesn't affect these people that much anymore. There can be a discrimination in the society, but that is not because of the slavery past of these people of their grandfather. These people are equal in front of the law for a century, right, ladies and gentlemen? There is no economic obstacle to those people who want to work and earn money. And we think that by giving these rights to those people, by banning all these slavery and giving the rights in front of the law, we have already paid our reputation to those people. We have already gave them the right to earn money and be economically advantageous in the society. And secondly, we told you that the economic difference that side proposition is actually talking about wasn't that big. And if there was an economic difference, that wasn't because of the slavery that was a century ago. The discrimination that can be present in the society, but this is not going to be solved by their system, ladies and gentlemen. Because their system actually brings more inequality because it reminds people the past, it reminds people that the slavery, it reminds people that they were inferior ones, but we don't believe that this is going to make these people's life better. And secondly, we have told you that the tax that you're taking the money from the people, and the government was the responsible of not giving the rights of these people, and it's not justified to take money of other people, and we had no response to our argument. And thirdly, we have told you that there's no connection right now between these peoples and their grandfathers by impact. There is no impact of your father being your grandfather being a slave in status quo in the law today. And moving on to the second clash point, is it bringing harm or benefits? Firstly, they have told us that there will be an economical equality and all of the discrimination, all of the social inequality, and everything will be solved by some money that is paid by the government. Firstly, we had no response to how much money is going to be paid to those people. And secondly, we didn't have any response what will happen next when we pay this money to those people, when the money was used, if the discrimination is still present in the society. And we have told you that the discrimination will still be present because you're actually reminding these people that they were slaves once. They can't earn their money by themselves. So as government, we need to pay them a bit more to make them equal with others, ladies and gentlemen. But our world wasn't that world. Our world believed that these people have the chance on earning this money by themselves. Our world gave these rights to those people. Our world wasn't discriminating that much. And we have told you that they will be harming these people's honor because we will be reminding them as slavery is something like biologically transmitted. And secondly, we will be reminding this society because they will be discriminated even more because discrimination wasn't because of the economic inequality in our case. The discrimination has other reasons like because of the race and the skin color of these people. So we believe that the side proposition case isn't solving anything. That is why we have a story.
Ladies and gentlemen, we find it funny that the third opposition brought up that we weren't addressing the root of the problem. Because what side proposition has been telling you this whole debate is that the root of the problem is economic inequality. So in response to the third opposition speaker, we think we are addressing the root of the problem, and we're the side that chooses to acknowledge our faults and repay the people who have been affected. It's for these reasons we have never been prouder to propose the resolution presented to us today. As your final speaker on side proposition, I'm going to be going over the three main themes of today's debate. Firstly, the duty to aid. Secondly, the link between the descendants and the ancestors. And finally, the effects on the descendants. And we're going to be proving to you why we take the debate clearly on each of these themes. Let's start with the duty to aid. So the biggest thing that side opposition brought up was they tried to tell you that it wasn't really the duty of the government to take away money from like other taxpayers to pay reparations. We had a few responses to that argument that we think solidly took that down. Firstly, we told you that the government has a duty to uphold like these consistent policies, to uphold the value that like slavery was harmful. We think that point still stands. But secondly, we also told you how our past government's actions caused this kind of economic instability for these descendants. We think that's another reason why we proved to you that the government really does have a duty. But in response to that, side opposition brought up the idea how like the government actually like already fulfilled their duty because like these black people or like these slave descendants already have rights and we've already like helped them enough. As Paul brought up so beautifully, we told you that these people should already have their rights. We don't think that's repaying them in any form. We think that's just giving them what they already deserve in the first place. We think the government can't justify the giving up of rights, the giving of rights as an apology. We think that should be the first step either way. We told you we don't think the government really expressed its regret. And basically, another point that side opposition brought up under this point was that we had to be getting rid of obstacles and like figuring out how much money we have to give these people in order to actually affect them. We told you very clearly that the obstacle is like this financial inequality and how we solve that problem. But secondly, let's look at the link between descendants and ancestors. And the biggest point on their side how there's no link between these people because the descendants don't feel like the economic or emotional suffering of someone from like centuries ago. We think we proved to you how that's inherently false. We showed you exactly how when a slave owner started here after the emancipation, a slave started here because they didn't have that kind of economic equality, and it doesn't matter how much time has passed. That difference hasn't been substantially improved. We gave you literal proof showing how African Americans are more under the poverty line than any other ethnic group, and we proved the link of that to you. But furthermore, we told you that under this emotional suffering, we explained to you how the suffering has been carried through time. Rosa explained to you how slaves were often identified by their skin color, and how in our status quo that carries through this idea of racism. We told you it's really not just the ancestors who felt this emotional suffering. They told you it was the discrimination that was the problem. We would tell you that this discrimination arises from the fact that during slave times, people with black skin were literally thought as inferior, and that thought has carried through. We think that point still stands. But finally, let's take a look at the effects on descendants. And my whole second point and Rosa's third point was basically about the impacts of reparations and why they're so impactful. We don't really think we got a legitimate response from side opposition. So let me explain to you why that idea still stands. We told you exactly how reparations are effective, and because it's money is a liquid asset. And basically the only response to that was that it's not enough money and there's too many obstacles and no one's going to use it. We told you how money is a liquid asset, and however they choose to use it, there's going to be an impact either way. Rosa told you exactly how increasing economic standards for these people by creating this economic kickstart through these reparations. She told you how these were going to be beneficial to these people. She explained to you this optics idea and how the government becomes more inclusive. And the biggest response side opposition had was that basically we're reminding these people of slavery. We're reminding these people that black people are considered weak. We think we tell you that what really reminds them isn't like us paying them back. What really reminds them is that they're forced to live in these poor socioeconomic standards because of slave times, because they weren't given the rights they were supposed to, because they weren't properly acknowledged. It's for these reasons we stand proud to be